She laughed when he asked her to prom, standing there in his worn-out sneakers and thrift store jacket, and 10 years later he walked into her father's office and bought the entire company she thought would always be hers. But to understand how a kid from the projects who could unafford a prom ticket ended up owning half the city, you need to hear what happened the night after that rejection. The night that changed everything. The night Dante Williams decided he would never let anyone make him feel small again. Dante grew up in the Riverside Projects on the east side, where the elevators never worked and the sound of gunshots was more common than birdsong, where his mama worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. He was 15 years old when his father walked out, leaving nothing but empty promises and unpaid bills. And his mother told him through tears that he would have to be the man of the house, now that his 2 younger sisters needed him to be strong. Every morning before school, Dante would wake up at 5 a.m. to help his mama get ready for her first shift at the diner, making sure his sisters had breakfast and their homework was done, walking them to school, even though it made him late to his own classes almost every single day. He wore the same 3 shirts, rotated throughout the week, the same jeans with patches his mama sewed on the knees, the same sneakers held together with duct tape and determination. And every single day he walked through those school doors knowing that kids like him were supposed to make it out, weren't supposed to dream bigger than survival. But Dante had this thing inside him, this fire that wouldn't go out no matter how many times life tried to extinguish it. And he discovered something that made him different from everyone else in those projects. He could see patterns where others saw chaos, could understand numbers and systems like they were speaking directly to his soul, could take broken things and figure out how to make them work again. When he was 12 years old, he fixed the building superintendent's computer using YouTube videos and sheer determination, and the super paid him $20, which was more money than Dante had ever held in his hands at one time. That's when something clicked in his mind, when he realized that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of the projects that didn't involve basketball or rap music. A way that nobody had told him about because nobody thought kids like him could walk that path. By sophomore year, Dante had taught himself basic coding, spending hours at the public library after school because they had computers and internet, teaching himself from free online courses while other kids his age were on the corner or in the streets. His grades were decent but not spectacular because he was always tired, always working, always taking care of his family. But his teachers saw something in him, saw that hunger in his eyes that couldn't be faked. Mr. Chung, his computer science teacher, started staying late to help him, giving him old programming books and obsolete equipment to practice with, telling him that intelligence was not about where you came from, but about how hard you were willing to work for where you wanted to go. And Dante worked harder than anyone, staying up until 2 or 3 in the morning, coding after his mama came home from her last shift. After his sisters were asleep, after the projects finally got quiet, except for the distant sirens and the occasional shout echoing through the concrete corridors, then there was Maya Rodriguez. And everything got more complicated because sometimes the heart wants what it wants even when the mind knows better. She was the daughter of the richest real estate developer in the city, the girl who drove a BMW to school on her 16th birthday, the girl who seemed to glow with a confidence that comes from never having to worry about whether the lights would stay on or if there would be food for dinner. Dante had watched her from afar for 2 years, had admired not just her beauty but the way she carried herself, the way she was kind to everyone regardless of their social status, the way she volunteered at the community center and actually seemed to care about making a difference. He thought, maybe, just maybe, she was different from the other rich kids. Thought maybe she could see past his worn clothes and duct-taped shoes to the person he was underneath, to the person he was determined to become. Junior year passed in a blur of coding and classes and taking care of his family, and Dante started to believe that maybe he had a shot at something bigger, that maybe the dreams he had weren't as impossible as everyone seemed to think. He built a small website for a local barbershop, and they paid him $200, which he immediately gave to his mama for the electric bill, and then word spread and other small businesses started asking for his help. He wasn't making much money, maybe a few $100s here and there, but it was something. It was proof that his skills had value, that he could create something from nothing using just his mind and a computer. Mr. Chun told him about college scholarships for kids interested in computer science, told him that schools were looking for talented students from underprivileged backgrounds, told him that if he kept working this hard and kept improving his grades, he might actually have a chance at getting out, at building a life beyond the projects. Senior year started and Dante felt something shifting inside him. Felt like maybe he was finally ready to step out of the shadows and claim his place in the world, to show everyone that being poor didn't mean being powerless. He had saved up $300 from his website gigs, had bought himself one decent outfit from the thrift store, had even managed to get a fresh haircut, and he decided that he was going to ask Maya Rodriguez to prom, because life was too short to let fear make all your decisions for you. He knew it was crazy new that a girl like her probably had guys with trust funds and sports cars lining up to take her, but something inside him said that he had to try, that he would regret it forever if he didn't at least shoot his shot. The day he decided to ask her was a Friday in April, one of those perfect spring days when the sun was shining and everything felt possible, when even the projects looked less gray and hopeless than usual. Dante had practiced what he would say 100 times in his head, had written it down and rehearsed it and tried to sound confident even though his heart was racing like it might burst right out of his chest. He found Maya after school by her locker, surrounded by her friends, as always, and he took a deep breath and walked up to her, with his head held high, reminding himself that he was just as worthy as anyone else, that poverty didn't define his value as a human being. He said her name, and she turned to look at him with those warm brown eyes, and for a second he thought maybe this would work, maybe she would see him for who he really was, and not just where he came from. He asked her to prom right there in the hallway, his voice steady, even though his hands were shaking, telling her that he knew he wasn't the obvious choice, but he would make sure she had a good time, that he would treat her with respect and make it a night she would remember. For a moment, there was silence, complete and total silence, and he could feel every eye in that hallway turning to watch, could feel the weight of everyone's judgment pressing down on him like a physical thing. Then Maya looked at her friends and back at him, and she started laughing. Not a mean laugh, but not a kind one either. A laugh that said she couldn't believe he was serious, couldn't believe someone like him would actually think he had a chance with someone like her. Her friend Jessica said something about how cute it was that Dante thought he could afford prom, about how the tickets alone cost more than his entire outfit probably did, and the other girls laughed too. And Maya didn't stop them, didn't defend him, just stood there with this uncomfortable smile on her face, like she felt bad but not bad enough to actually do anything about it. She told him that she was already going with Brad Hutchinson, the quarterback with the perfect smile in the college football scholarship, told him that maybe he should ask someone more on his level, someone who understood his situation. And Dante stood there, feeling like the floor had opened up beneath him, feeling like every insecurity he had ever had was being confirmed in front of the entire school, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his entire life. He walked away without saying another word, walked through those hallways with his head down while people whispered and pointed and laughed, walked all the way home to the projects with tears burning in his eyes that he refused to let fall. He climbed the 7 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken, as always, walked into the apartment where his mama was, getting ready for her evening shift, and she took one look at his face and knew something had broken inside her boy. She held him while he cried. This woman who had sacrificed everything for her children, who had worked her fingers to the bone so they could have a chance at something better. And she told him that pain was just fuel, if you knew how to use it, that the people who laugh at you today will be the ones asking for favors tomorrow, if you work hard enough and never give up. That night, after his mama left for work and his sisters were asleep, Dante sat at the old computer Mr. Chun had given him and made a decision that would change the trajectory of his entire life. He wasn't going to let Maya's rejection define him, wasn't going to let anyone's perception of his worth determine his future, wasn't going to stay in the projects and become another statistic that people pointed to when they talked about wasted potential. He opened up his laptop and started researching, really researching, learning everything he could about business and technology and real estate and investment, teaching himself about the systems that kept people like him down and figuring out how to use those same systems to lift himself up. He found online courses from Stanford and MIT that were free, found books about entrepreneurship and wealth building at the library, found mentors on forums and in chat rooms who were willing to share their knowledge with a hungry kid from the hood who refused to accept his circumstances as his destiny. The next 2 months before graduation became the most intense period of learning in Dante's entire life, because he had found something more powerful than hope. He had found purpose. He started building more sophisticated websites for clients he found online, undercutting the competition because he was willing to work harder and longer for less money just to build his portfolio and his skills. He taught himself about SEO and digital marketing and web applications, about how businesses worked and what they needed to succeed in the digital age, about the gaps in the market that someone smart and hungry could exploit. He slept 4 hours a night, running on coffee and determination, balancing his family responsibilities with his schoolwork and his growing freelance business, pushing himself harder than he had ever pushed before, because now he had something to prove. His grades actually improved because desperation is a hell of a motivator. And by the time prom came around, Dante had made enough money from his freelance work to afford a real suit and a ticket if he had wanted to go. But he chose to work instead, chose to spend that night building a web application for a small business client while Maya danced with Brad Hutchinson in a hotel ballroom across town. He told himself he didn't care, told himself that he was building something bigger than one night of teenage fantasy. But part of him still hurt, still wondered what it would have been like if she had said yes, if she had given him a chance to show her who he really was. But that pain became fuel, just like his mama said it would, became the fire that kept him going when exhaustion tried to drag him down, became the reminder of why he could never stop working, never stop climbing, never stop fighting for the life he knew he deserved. Graduation came, and Dante walked across that stage with a full scholarship to State University for computer science, the first person in his family to go to college. And his mama cried tears of joy while his sisters screamed his name from the bleachers. Maya was valedictorian and gave a speech about following your dreams and never letting anyone tell you that you won't succeed. And Dante listened to those words and thought about the irony of someone who had never struggled a day in her life, giving advice about perseverance to people who fought for survival every single day. But he clapped with everyone else, and he smiled, and he accepted his diploma. And that summer before college, he worked 3 jobs to save money, to help his mama to make sure his sisters would be okay while he was away at school learning how to turn his skills into real wealth. College was harder than anything Dante had ever experienced because now he was competing with kids who had been coding since elementary school, kids who had access to resources and tutors and internships through family connections, Kids who didn't have to send money home every month or worry about whether their mama could afford her medication. But Dante had something they didn't have. He had hunger. Real hunger. The kind that comes from knowing what rock bottom looks like and being absolutely determined never to go back there. He worked as a campus IT technician during the day and built websites and applications for clients at night. Sleeping in the computer lab because it was quieter than his dorm and the coffee was free, building his portfolio and his bank account slowly but surely. By sophomore year, he had incorporated his freelance work into a real company hired to other students to help him take on bigger projects and started making enough money that his mama could quit one of her jobs and his sisters could get new clothes that did come from the thrift store. Junior year, he built an application that helped small businesses manage their online presence more efficiently. Something simple but useful that solved a real problem. And it started getting attention from local business owners who were tired of paying big marketing agencies thousands of dollars for basic services. Dante charged a fraction of what the big companies charged and provided better customer service. Because he remembered what it was like to be small and struggling and ignored by people who thought you were unworth their time. His company grew and he hired more students, created jobs for kids from backgrounds like his who needed opportunities, built something that mattered beyond just making money. By senior year, his company was pulling in 6 figures annually and he was being recruited by tech companies in Silicon Valley. But Dante had bigger plans than working for someone else's dream. He was building his own empire and nothing was going to stop him. After graduation, Dante moved back to his city, but not back to the projects. He got a small office downtown and started scaling his business aggressively, going after bigger clients and developing more sophisticated products. He learned about real estate investing and started buying rundown properties in neglected neighborhoods, fixing them up and renting them out affordably because he remembered what it was like to live in places where landlords didn't care if the heat worked or the roof leaked. He reinvested every dollar he made back into the business and into property, building wealth slowly and strategically, learning from every mistake and never taking his foot off of the gas. 5 years after graduation, his company was worth millions and he owned 40 properties across the city. And people started calling him a success story, a kid who made it out. Proof that the American dream still existed if you worked hard enough. But Dante never forgot where he came from. Never forgot the feeling of standing in that hallway while Maya and her friends laughed at him. Never forgot the night his mama came home so tired she could barely stand, or the times his sisters cried because kids at school made fun of their clothes. He started a foundation that provided free coding classes to kids in underprivileged neighborhoods, created scholarship programs for students from the projects, invested in community centers and after-school programs because he knew that talent was equally distributed but opportunity was not. And then one day he got a call from a business broker about Rodriguez Development Corporation, the real estate company owned by Maya's father, and how the old man was retiring and looking to sell because none of his children wanted to take over the family business. Dante did his research and learned that Maya had gotten her business degree but never had the drive to build anything of her own, had worked in her father's company for a few years before getting bored and moving to New York to pursue influencer marketing or something equally meaningless. He learned that Rodriguez Development owned over 200 properties, including the entire neighborhood where Maya had grown up, the houses with the manicured lawns, and the fancy cars in the driveways, the country club and the shopping center, and the office buildings where the wealthy people worked. And Dante made an offer that Rodriguez couldn't refuse, bought the entire company outright with cash. And just like that, he owned the world that had once looked down on him, owned the streets where kids like him weren't welcome, owned the future that people like Maya thought would always belong to them. The day the deal closed, Dante drove through that neighborhood in a car worth more than most people's houses. Past Maya's childhood home that he now technically owned. Past the high school where she had laughed at him all those years ago. And he didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. He felt free. Free from the pain of that rejection. Free from the need to prove anything to anyone. Free from the limitations that poverty had tried to place on his dreams. He thought about that scared kid in the thrift store jacket asking a girl to prom and getting laughed at. Thought about the nights he coded until his eyes hurt and his fingers cramped. Thought about his mama's tears and his sister's struggles and every person who'd ever doubted him, and he realized that success isn't about revenge or proving people wrong. It's about becoming so focused on building your vision that their opinions become irrelevant. It's about rising so high that the people who once looked down on you can't even see you anymore. Maya Rodriguez had laughed at a projects kid in worn-out sneakers, and that kid had used her laughter as fuel to build an empire that now owned her entire world. Not because he wanted to hurt her, but because he refused to let her rejection define his ceiling. That's the power of turning pain into purpose, of letting the people who doubt you become the reason you succeed, of understanding that where you start doesn't determine where you finish. Only how hard you're willing to work to get there determines that.